So I want to first say thank you for having me. I'm really excited to participate in this discussion with such esteemed colleagues. And I think part of what your question gets at is a larger question I'm interested in, which is just how do we make diverse societies work, right? Like the United States is kind of at the forefront of what is happening in many countries, which they're becoming increasingly heterogeneous along lines of things like ethnicity and language and national origin. And there are all sorts of conflicts that arise when you have a society that has that kind of heterogeneity. And what we've got on a lot of college campuses in some ways is like that problem kind of in a microcosm, right? Like there are these different interests and needs, and part of what I think I take as a slightly different line of inquiry around this as compared with Professor Fish or Jonathan Rauch is that I find that the kind of sweeping comments of like, you know, campuses are all about free inquiry or not free speech, or that we should have this kind of, you know, sort of one trigger warning which says the only thing here is you're going to be challenged on education, ignores the enormous complexity of what is a college campus. Okay, so what do I mean by that? So I'm curious, by a show of hands, let's think of a controversial topic. So let's say, you know, if you favor gun rights, imagine that there's somebody who's a gun control advocate, or if you favor gun control, imagine somebody who's a gun rights advocate. By a show of hands, how many of you would say that speaker should be able to talk in your, there's some plaza at Creighton University, somebody should be able to give a speech in a kind of public forum? By a show of hands, how many think that somebody you disagree with on the issue of guns should be able to speak in a public forum, right? Okay, so that's almost everybody. So now, by a show of hands, how many of you think that person should be able to come to your dorm room and talk, you know, between 9 and midnight? Okay, so suddenly the rules have changed. Well, why is that? You are all in favor of speech in one context, but not in another. Okay, so the dean at the University of Chicago, who said, I am a fierce advocate of, or I mean, that's not his language, but, you know, we believe in, you know, a deep engagement with ideas, right? In the comments you read, he said he excluded harassment. Well, harassment is speech. Why isn't harassment allowed? Okay, so that's, you know, clearly we're now sort of making some distinctions here. He also, it turns out, is an ally of the Gay and Lesbian Student Center on campus, which is considered a safe space for students, right? So at the same time that they're saying we're against safe spaces, he is also an ally of this one institution. And I think part of what gets us in trouble is to sort of say, I believe deeply in a really robust First Amendment, but I also increasingly appreciate that things like a dorm room is a different kind of space than this forum. And so when we think about a campus as this kind of complex institution, we start to have to appreciate that there are dorm rooms which should have potentially different standards than classrooms, right? And that there might be rules around sexual harassment in an office that are different than the kinds of rules we might have for a debate in a public forum, and that the context matters. And so what we really want is to think more critically about, well, in public spheres, in places where we're doing this kind of intellectual inquiry, we really want a robust set of rules around, you know, that speech is privileged, that inquiry is privileged, and that we don't want to have a safe space in a classroom. And at the same time, the idea that you can have a diverse society where everybody is constantly subject to hate speech is not a happy place for most people, right? I mean, I don't think you might say that you believe deeply in speech, but you still want to have a domain you can retreat to. And in the off-campus life, that might be your home where you can close a door and you have property rights that allow you to say, you're not allowed to come and talk or shout at me between 9 and midnight. But in a dorm on a campus that's owned by the university, it becomes messier. Right? So we actually need the university to have a different set of rules potentially for a dorm than a classroom, even though it owns both, and I as a student have no property rights in either case to dictate what the rules are about who can come into the space and what they can say. Right? So at the heart of this is a pretty simple idea, which is that context matters, and that universities are in the business of kind of managing a lot of different contexts for a lot of different needs, and that what we want is robust speech in areas of the public sphere where we're engaged in issues of debate around concerns that are the sort of social, what are sort of the common good and self-government and issues of academic matters, and potentially different. And the town plaza is like a town square. We want robust speech there, and we might also want places that feel like home, where we can go and not feel like we have to be subject to those same rules, and that is what allows a diverse society to thrive, is that you have places of engagement and places that are where you have some kind of neighborhood or home that you can kind of retreat to as well, and that allows a diverse set of folk to come together and engage and also sometimes disengage. That's part of what a free society means too, is that you do not always have to be in a kind of constant conversation with people you disagree with. It doesn't mean you shouldn't in a campus be engaged with people you disagree with some of the time or even a lot of the time, but it's not that that's required 100% of the time. And so this idea of appreciating that contexts matter and that the kinds of physical plants that we've, the physical structures we have determine different kinds of needs. The different kinds of jobs we do in those spaces require different sets of rules. And so the closest thing I'll say is there's an idea in the law of what's sometimes called legal pluralism. And I think what I'm advocating, legal pluralism, is the idea that you might have kind of different rules for different domains. And that's a similar sort of thing that I think should apply on campuses. What we want is a kind of speech pluralism, where we have a robust commitment in some spaces and some sense of capacity to have what even this dean who is saying I'm against safe spaces is also simultaneously endorsing in having a gay and lesbian student center on campus.